Daniel Benson was just 24 years old, but his life already felt too heavy to carry. He was a final-year architecture student with big dreams. He wanted to design great buildings, travel the world, and most of all, lift his family out of poverty. But right now, he was buried in problems. His father had died 2 years ago, leaving behind a mountain of debts. And now, his younger sister was very sick and needed urgent hospital care. Daniel's mother, a kind and hard-working woman, tried everything she could. But as a petty trader, there was only so much money she could make selling fruits and vegetables by the roadside. Every day she came home looking more tired, more worried. Daniel did his best to help. He studied during the day, worked part-time at night, and sometimes even skipped meals just to save money. But no matter how hard he worked, it was never enough. His sister's hospital bills kept piling up. The landlord had threatened to throw them out more than once. And his school fees, almost forgotten. One night, Daniel sat on a bench outside the hospital holding a crumpled hospital bill in his hand. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. That was when everything changed. His phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unknown number. "Come to Ebony Grand Hotel, room 905. Ask for Madame Evelyn Adenuga. You won't regret it." At first, Daniel thought it was a scam, but something told him to go. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was hope. Either way, he borrowed money for transport and took a bus to the hotel. When he got to room 905, a tall man in a suit opened the door and let him in. Sitting by the window was an older woman in a long blue dress. She was graceful, calm, and looked like someone who had seen too much. "You're Daniel," she said, not asking, just stating. "Sit." He obeyed, nervous and confused. Then she said something that made his heart stop. "I want to marry you. No love, no games, just business." Daniel blinked. I don't understand." "I'll pay all your debts," she said, "and your sister's medical bills. In return, you marry me. No one needs to know the details." Daniel's mouth went dry. "But why me?" She smiled faintly. "Because you have nothing, and everything." Daniel didn't know what she meant. But as he sat there thinking about his sick sister, his mother's tired eyes, and the weight of all his troubles, he felt the walls closing in. He looked up. "What do I have to do?" Madame Evelyn opened a small folder. "Sign, and we will be married." Daniel couldn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling of their small rented apartment, the sound of his sister coughing in the next room piercing his heart. On the table beside him was the folder Madame Evelyn had given him, still unopened. He hadn't signed it yet. Everything about the offer felt wrong. He had never met this woman before. She was older, much older. In fact, she looked even older than his own mother. It didn't feel natural. It didn't feel right. Was he really going to marry someone he didn't love? Someone who looked at him like a puzzle piece, not a person. But then he thought of his sister. The doctors had said she didn't have much time left without proper treatment. He thought of the bills, the angry landlord, and the final warning from school about unpaid tuition. He was already drowning. This offer, this marriage, might be the only rope left. The next morning, Daniel sat his mother down. She was peeling oranges in their tiny kitchen, her hands moving slowly, as if already tired from a full day ahead. "Mama," Daniel said gently, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked up, worried. "Is it your studies? I know you have been taking on so much on your own." Daniel shook his head. Then he told her everything about Madame Evelyn, the offer, and the marriage. At first, his mother didn't say a word. She just stared at him. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but heavy. "I've heard of Madame Evelyn. People say she's rich beyond imagination, but also very private. Some say strange." Daniel lowered his eyes. "I know how it sounds. It's not love, it's just to save us." His mother's lips trembled. Then she sighed deeply and placed her hand over his. "I'm not happy about it, my son. But what choice do we have?" she whispered. "If this is the path that will save your sister, then may God go with you." 3 days later, Daniel signed the papers. The wedding was quiet, almost like a secret. It took place in a courthouse. No family, no friends, just Madame Evelyn, her silent lawyer, and a judge who barely looked up as he read the vows. Daniel said the words. So did she. No rings were exchanged, No kisses, only a signature and a stamp. That evening, a black SUV came to pick Daniel up. He didn't even get to pack much, just a small bag with some clothes and his architecture tools. He sat in the back seat, silent, watching the world blur by. Ebong City looked like a different planet compared to his street. Skyscrapers kissed the clouds. The roads were smooth and wide. But when the car pulled up to Madame Evelyn's mansion, Daniel's heart sank. It was big, too big. Cold white walls, glass doors, and a metal gate that closed like a prison. Inside, the house was silent. Marble floors, golden stairs, expensive chandeliers, but no warmth, no laughter, no sign of life. A maid showed him to his room. It was twice the size of his entire house. The bed was huge. The windows looked out into the city lights, and still, it felt empty. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door. He was now a married man, but somehow he had never felt more alone. Daniel had been living in Madame Evelyn's mansion for 3 days now, but it didn't feel like living. It felt like being trapped in a museum. The house was big and beautiful, yes. The floors were polished, the curtains spotless, the air always smelled faintly of lavender. But something about the place felt empty. Not just quiet, lifeless. There were only 3 staff members in the entire mansion. A middle-aged housekeeper who hardly spoke, a young cleaner who avoided eye contact, and a tall, stern-looking driver who nodded but never smiled. None of them ever started a conversation. They answered questions with short words and quickly went about their duties like shadows. And Madame Evelyn? She was barely around. In the mornings, Daniel would come downstairs hoping to talk, but she was gone. The housekeeper would always say the same thing. "She stepped out, sir." No one said where. No one said when she'd be back. Sometimes Evelyn would return late at night. Daniel would hear the sound of her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Once he waited in the hallway just to greet her, but she walked past him without a word, her face calm and unreadable. At meals, she sat across from him at the long dining table, always dressed in quiet elegance, always composed. She asked polite questions about his studies, his sister's health, but when Daniel asked about her day or her past, she would smile faintly and change the subject. There was one thing Daniel noticed more than anything else: the doors. Some rooms in the house were always locked. Even when no one was around, Daniel would gently test the doorknobs. Nothing moved. Heavy locks, no explanation. The worst part was the silence. No music, no television, no laughter. Just the soft hum of the fridge and the distant ticking of the wall clock. On the 3rd night, Daniel stood on the balcony, staring out at the glittering lights of Ebong City. Below him, the streets buzzed with life. Cars, people, voices. Up here, nothing. He thought about his mother, his sister, the reason he was here. He had hoped things would get easier after the wedding, that maybe Evelyn would soften, that the house would feel like a home. But instead, it felt like the walls were closing in. That night, Daniel walked past one of the locked rooms again. As he moved, he thought he heard something behind the door, a soft click, like someone turning a key from the inside. He stopped, pressed his ear gently against the wood. Silence. He slowly stepped back, heart beating a little faster. There was something about this house. And there was something about Madame Evelyn. She wasn't just private. She was hiding something. Later that evening, Daniel sat quietly in his room, the lights dim, the city lights blinking softly outside the window. His phone call with his mother had just ended. "She's doing better," Mama had said with a tired but hopeful voice. "The money you gave us before the wedding helped a lot. The doctors say she's stronger now, eating better too." Daniel had smiled. For the first time since entering Evelyn's mansion, he felt a small wave of peace wash over him. At least his sister was healing. That was all that mattered. But even as he stared out the window, his heart still felt restless. Madame Evelyn hadn't sent them any money since the wedding. Everything she promised had only come before they signed the marriage papers. He didn't want to worry his mother with that detail, but deep down, it troubled him. He was still thinking about all this when a knock came on his door. He stood up quickly and opened it. Evelyn stood there, dressed in her usual flowing gown, calm as always. In her hands was a brown folder. "May I come in?" she asked. Daniel nodded, stepping aside. She walked in and sat gently on the edge of the armchair near the desk, placing the folder on top of it. "These are just routine business forms," she said smoothly. "Since we're now married, there are certain agreements and updates that need your signature, for estate planning and general legal alignment." Daniel blinked. "Estate planning? Don't worry," she said, offering a soft smile. "Nothing complicated, just formalities." He walked over to the folder and opened it. Pages and pages of text. Legal terms, small print, lines for signature. Daniel's eyes scanned the top of the first page, but the words felt like a blur. His head was full, his thoughts still on his sister, on the hospital bills, on his next school project deadline. He hadn't slept well in days. Evelyn stood up slowly, studying him. "Nothing you should worry about," she said calmly, already heading toward the door. "But I would appreciate it if you signed them now. Let's get it over with. Just to keep things moving." Daniel nodded. "Okay." He sat down, picked up a pen, and hesitated. He should read it. He really should. But the weight in his chest made it hard to focus. His sister's face flashed in his mind, hooked up to machines, coughing through the phone. She was finally getting better. That was what mattered. And Evelyn had been helping, right? He glanced at the door, then back at the folder. With a deep sigh, he signed every page, one after the other. Without reading a single word, then he handed it over to her. She turned and left. The next morning, Madame Evelyn was gone again. As usual, the housekeeper simply said, "She stepped out," and disappeared down the hall. Daniel was tired of staying in his room. The silence of the mansion was starting to feel heavier by the day, so he decided to take a walk to stretch his legs and maybe clear his mind. He wandered through the marble corridors, past the tall glass windows and heavy golden curtains. Every room looked the same, beautiful, cold, untouched. But as he turned into a hallway he hadn't explored before, something caught his eye. It was the library. The door creaked slightly as he pushed it open. Books lined every wall, some neatly arranged, others piled carelessly. A thick smell of old paper and wood filled the room. Daniel walked slowly, running his fingers along the dusty shelves until one book tilted slightly. Curious, he pulled it. Click. Something behind the shelf shifted. His heart skipped. He pushed the shelf gently to the side, and there it was. A small drawer built into the wall, hidden. Inside, lying quietly, was an old brass key. He held it up, staring. What could it open? He checked door after door, until he reached one room he hadn't paid much attention to before. It was always locked. He hesitated for a second, then tried the key. It turned. The door creaked open. Dust floated in the air. The curtains were drawn. The room smelled like something forgotten. Inside he saw a rocking chair, old toys and picture frames scattered across a shelf. A faded teddy bear sat in the corner. It was a nursery. Daniel stepped in slowly, almost holding his breath. He looked at the photos. There was a young boy smiling beside a man and a woman. The woman was Evelyn. The man must have been her late husband. His heart pounded as he moved toward a small wooden chest. Inside, he found journals, folded documents, and a dusty album. He sat on the floor and began reading. The journals belonged to Evelyn's husband. The more he read, the colder he felt. Page after page spoke of a partnership gone wrong. The name Obiora Benson kept coming up. Daniel froze. That was his father's name. The writing spoke of betrayal, of financial ruin, of a man trusted and then deceived. The writer blamed Obiora for everything: the collapse of their business, the death threats, the eventual loss of their son, who had run away after the scandal. Daniel's hands trembled. He knew his father's business had failed. He remembered the fear in his mother's eyes when the debt collectors came, but he had never imagined this. His father, a swindler? No, that couldn't be. Just as he was about to leave the room, something familiar caught his eye on a nearby table. It was the folder, the same one Evelyn had given him to sign the day before. He picked it up, flipped through it. Something didn't feel right. Daniel pulled out his phone, stepped into the light by the window and began snapping photos of each page. Then he opened WhatsApp. "Bro, I need your help. Something's wrong. These are the papers I signed. Can you check them for me?" He sent the photos to his childhood friend, David Okafor, a practicing lawyer. David was older, but they had grown up on the same street, played football together, until his family moved to another city. They had stayed in touch, and now Daniel needed him more than ever. He stared at the door of the nursery, heart heavy. Something was going on, and he was in the middle of it. Daniel left the nursery slowly, his mind spinning. The images, the journals, the name of his father, Obiora Benson. It was all too much. Could it really be true? Could his own father have destroyed another man's family? And if that was the case, why was he now married to the victim's widow? He needed answers, real answers. As he walked back through the hallways, his steps were quiet. The house, once just cold and strange, now felt dangerous. Downstairs, he noticed the cleaner sweeping quietly by the staircase. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, but there was something sharp in her eyes, like she knew more than she let on. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Can I ask you something personal?" The girl didn't stop sweeping. She kept her head down. "It's not safe to ask questions in this house, sir," she whispered. Daniel looked around. No one was in sight. "Please," he said, lowering his voice. "I need to understand what's going on. Just tell me the truth. Who was Madame Evelyn's husband? What happened to her son?" The girl's hands froze. She looked up, her eyes now full of something between pity and fear. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You still have time to leave. If I were you, I'd run while I still can." Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Why?" She looked around again, then leaned closer. "All I know is what the older staff say," she replied. "Her husband died. They say it was suicide. After that, she was never the same. The boy disappeared too. No one knows what really happened, and Madame Evelyn, she became someone else. Cold, careful, dangerous." Daniel's throat went dry. His heart pounded. "And what does that have to do with me?" The girl stared at him for a long moment. "I don't know that much, sir." She picked up her broom and turned away. Before he could ask another question, she walked off, quickly disappearing down the corridor without another word. He stood there, frozen, alone again, but now with even more questions than before. Whatever was going on in this house, it wasn't just strange, it was deliberate. The next morning, Daniel barely got out of bed. His mind hadn't rested since the cleaner's warning. Everything in the mansion felt tighter, colder, like the walls themselves were watching him. But the real weight pressed down the moment his phone rang. It was David. Daniel picked up, trying to keep his voice steady. "Bro," David said without wasting time, "I've gone through everything you sent me." Daniel sat up straighter. "And?" "Daniel, those weren't just routine documents. They were debt transfer agreements for a dying company, a company that's on the edge of collapse. You've basically been made the owner and the one responsible for every single debt." Daniel's chest tightened. "What?" "It's a trap, man. A clean, legal-looking trap. And if we don't act fast, you're going down for everything." Daniel's mouth was dry. His heart pounded in his ears. "This must be it," he whispered. "Her revenge." David was silent for a moment. "I think so," he said. "But we're not just guessing anymore. I did some digging. Got help from one of my cousins in the financial crimes unit. Turns out, Madame Evelyn has been setting this plan in motion for years. We found old documents, secret company records, and more disturbing, a file titled Benson's Family Strategy. Daniel's blood went cold. "My dad's name," he said, barely breathing. "Exactly. She's been building a web around your family for 2 decades. Every piece of this, Your marriage, those papers, even the timing, it was all planned. Daniel stood up, pacing his room. She wants to destroy me, like she thinks we destroyed her. It gets worse, David added. We hacked into the CCTV system from the day you signed the documents. I cross-checked the footage timestamps with the folder pages. She switched them, Daniel, right after you signed. Daniel stopped in his tracks. So she forged my signature on new documents. Exactly. Daniel's fists clenched. Can we prove it? We can, and we will, David said. I've already backed up the footage. My uncle's friend in internal affairs is looking into her other businesses too. And bro, she's into everything. Fake investments, shell companies, silent blackmail cases. She's been untouchable for years because she plays smart. Daniel's voice was low. Then we play smarter. David nodded from the other end of the line. We gather everything, quietly. If we alert her now, she'll bury the rest of the proof. My family's got connections. We'll use them. Daniel exhaled, slow and deep. For the first time in days, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt clarity. This ends now, he said. The call with David had barely ended when Daniel began packing a few things into his bag. Every second he stayed in the mansion felt like a second closer to danger. Now that he knew the truth, he needed to leave before Evelyn realized what he had uncovered. But just as he reached for the door, it swung open. Two of Madame Evelyn's security men stood there, stone-faced, silent. "Where do you think you're going, Mr. Benson?" one of them asked. Daniel's throat went dry. Before he could answer, they stepped in and took him by the arms, not rough, but firm. No struggle, no shouting, just quiet control. They led him down the hall, through the cold corridors, until they stopped at a large wooden door. Her study. One of the guards opened it and gently pushed Daniel inside. Madame Evelyn was standing by the window, her back to him. The curtains were half drawn. Outside, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky in soft orange and red. She didn't turn. "You were trying to run," she said calmly. Daniel stood still. "Yes." She slowly faced him. "So, you found out?" "I did," he said. "Everything." A long silence followed. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she didn't deny it. "Yes," she said. "I switched the papers. I made you the face of that company. You're in trouble, Daniel. Big trouble." Daniel stepped forward. "Why? Why me?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Because your father is already dead," she said bitterly, "and someone has to pay." Daniel clenched his jaw. "You think he destroyed your life?" "I don't think I know," she snapped. "My husband took his life after that betrayal. My son went missing after that. I have done everything, spent so much, but nothing. I lost everything. And your father walked away, like it meant nothing." Daniel slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. He opened it and held it out. "This is a letter from my father to your husband," he said softly. "It was written just days before his death. I didn't know what this meant back then, but when I saw the documents in that room, I finally understood. He was trying to warn him, trying to protect him from someone else, something else, a gang or something, Madame Evelyn. He tried to help." Evelyn didn't move. Her face didn't change at first. Then she laughed, a short, sharp laugh that cracked under its own weight. "A lie," she whispered. "I don't believe such nonsense. It's too neat, too late." Daniel's voice stayed calm. "It's the truth, whether you believe it or not." She looked at him now. Her expression was hard, but her eyes had shifted. Just a little. "I've waited 20 years for this," she said. "I built every step of your fall with my own hands." "You built it on pain," Daniel replied, "but not on truth." Her hands trembled slightly. She turned away again, back to the window. Daniel didn't say another word. Her back turned to him, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she clutched the letter from Obiora. She refused to believe it. She whispered, "Your father destroyed everything. My husband, my son, my life." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "You've held on to pain for so long you never stopped to really investigate what was true. Just then the door burst open. David stepped in, a folder in hand, his face tight with urgency. "Daniel, you need to hear this. She needs to hear this." Evelyn turned, startled. "Who is this?" David didn't waste time. "My name is David Okafor. I'm a lawyer, and I have the truth." He walked toward the center of the room and dropped the folder on her desk. "These are original police records, interviews, evidence that was buried almost 20 years ago." Evelyn's face was blank, unreadable. "Your husband wasn't betrayed by Mr. Benson," David said gently. "He was being blackmailed by a woman he had an affair with. She was part of a criminal gang. She faked a pregnancy, took money, and threatened to ruin him if he didn't confess everything to you." Evelyn blinked, her hand slowly lowering the letter. David continued. "He paid, again and again. But it didn't stop. The pressure, the shame, it broke him. That's why he took his life. Not because of Daniel's father. Your husband kept it from you to protect you." Silence. Evelyn staggered slightly, catching the edge of the table. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Daniel watched as her eyes filled with tears, hot, angry, confused tears. "All these years," she breathed. "Everything I built, all that pain." "You built it on a lie," David said gently, "and you passed that pain on to Daniel, an innocent man." The room was heavy with truth. Suddenly, red and blue lights flickered through the windows, the sound of engines, doors slamming, footsteps. A knock at the study door, followed by uniformed officers. "Madam Evelyn Adenuga," the lead officer said, stepping forward. "You are under arrest for fraud, document forgery, and financial crimes under investigation." Evelyn stood motionless. As they placed the cuffs on her wrists, she didn't resist. Her gaze slowly met Daniel's. There was no more fire in her eyes, only disbelief and something like regret. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to, because even in that moment of justice, his heart ached. He had seen her anger. He had lived inside her trap. But now, seeing the truth shatter her, he couldn't bring himself to hate her. She had been a woman lost in darkness, chasing a shadow of revenge. And now, that darkness had swallowed her completely. The mansion felt quieter after Madame Evelyn's arrest, but in a different way. It wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't eerie or strange. Now it just felt empty. Daniel stood in the hallway one last time, his bag slung over his shoulder. The sun poured through the tall windows, filling the space with soft golden light. Thanks to David's efforts and the overwhelming evidence, Daniel's name had been cleared. The forged documents, the company debt, and every setup Evelyn had constructed around him were torn down piece by piece. He was finally free. But freedom didn't feel like victory. It felt like surviving something that should never have happened in the first place. Back at school, Daniel tried to return to normal life. His classmates whispered. Some stared. A few avoided him completely. But Daniel no longer cared about gossip. He had learned his lesson. He had walked into Evelyn's trap because of one thing: money. His desperation had blinded him, and now he knew better. He swore to himself, sitting alone in the back corner of the campus library one evening, "I will never chase shortcuts again. If I build anything in this life, I'll build it with my own hands." And he meant it. He threw himself into his studies with quiet determination. Every project, every sketch, every model he built reminded him that he still had control over his future. One afternoon, as he was heading out of class, his phone buzzed. It was a letter. Delivered to his hostel, no return address, just his name on the envelope. He opened it. The handwriting was shaky. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. It was from Evelyn. "Daniel, by the time you read this, I will have had enough time to sit with my regrets. I'm sorry. Truly. What I did to you wasn't justice. It was pain passing through me like a curse I refused to let go of, and in trying to punish a ghost, I almost ruined a living soul. You were innocent, and yet I treated you like a weapon. My biggest mistake wasn't just the trap I set, it was never asking for the full truth. Thank you for not hating me, even when I deserved it. In my will, I've left you everything, my estate, my companies, and what's left of my legacy. But I ask for one thing in return. Find my son. If he's alive, bring him home. I don't want to die without knowing he's safe. Evelyn. Daniel folded the letter slowly, holding it against his chest. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel lost. He had a purpose. He looked up at the sky, his eyes steady, and whispered, "I'll find him." The letter stayed with Daniel everywhere he went. Folded in his wallet, memorized in his mind. Find my son. If he's alive, bring him home. He had no reason to honor Madame Evelyn's wish, not after everything she put him through. But Daniel wasn't doing it for her anymore. He was doing it because no one deserved to live or die with that kind of pain. With the resources she left behind and the help of David and a private search agency, Daniel began the long process of searching for Evelyn's son. It wasn't easy. So much time had passed. There were no clear records. No one seemed to know where a scared little boy had gone all those years ago. But Daniel didn't give up. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, David called. "I think we found him." Daniel's heart leapt. In a small town near the border, across the country line, there was a school teacher. His name was Kofi Mensah. He had no birth records before the age of 10. He had been adopted by an elderly Ghanaian couple who found him wandering alone in a village, barely able to speak, traumatized and confused. Daniel took a flight the next day. The moment he saw Kofi, he knew. The shape of his face, the eyes, the quiet way he carried pain and peace together. He ran a DNA test just to be sure, and it confirmed everything. When he finally approached him, they sat under a tree behind the school as the children played in the distance. Daniel told him everything, who he was, who Evelyn was, and why he had come. At first, Kofi was silent. Then he spoke slowly, his voice filled with old memories. "I ran away after Papa died," he said. "I didn't understand it then. I didn't even remember much about my past. I just knew Mama was angry all the time. She cried every night. I felt like it was my fault. One night I walked away. I don't even remember how I crossed the border. The couple who found me, they saved me, gave me a new name, a new life." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I thought she hated me," Kofi whispered. "No," Daniel said gently. "She was lost without you." He handed him the letter. Kofi read every word. His hands shook. The next morning they made the journey together, back across the border into Ebong City and straight to the correctional facility where Evelyn was being held. She had aged rapidly since the arrest. Her once sharp eyes were now dimmer, her body thinner. She had heard nothing from the outside world, only the silence of her regrets. When she saw Daniel step in, she smiled faintly. Then she saw the young man beside him. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. And for a long moment, she simply stared. Then she began to cry, quietly at first, then with a tremble in her chest. Kofi stepped forward. "Mama," he said softly. Evelyn reached through the bars, grabbing his hand with both of hers. "My boy," she choked. "My son." Daniel stood back as they held each other's hands. Two lives reunited through pain and forgiveness. "Now," Evelyn whispered through her tears, "I can die without regrets." She turned to Daniel, her face wet but smiling. "Thank you," she said, "for doing what I couldn't do all those years. You brought him back to me." Daniel nodded, his voice thick. "You deserved the truth," he said. Evelyn leaned her head against the cold steel of the bars, eyes closed, and for the first time in a very long time, peace returned to her face. The ride back from the prison was quiet. Neither Daniel nor Kofi spoke much. The air between them was filled with something deeper than words, relief, reflection, and the strange peace that comes after long, painful storms. A week later, Daniel returned to the estate lawyer's office with a clear decision. "I want everything transferred to Kofi," he said. The lawyer blinked in surprise. Everything? Daniel nodded. It's rightfully his. Madam Evelyn didn't destroy all this for me to keep it. Her son is alive. This is his legacy, not mine. And just like that, Daniel walked away from the mansion, the businesses, the bank accounts. But Kofi had other plans. You're not walking away completely, he said with a half smile when they met again. Too many rooms in that house are wasting away. Come stay, at least for a while. Bring your mum, your sister too. Daniel hesitated. He still didn't feel like he belonged in that mansion, but his mother insisted. It's not about the house, my son, she told him. It's about healing and moving forward. So reluctantly, Daniel moved in. The silence that once haunted the halls had faded. Laughter returned. Light danced through the windows again. Kofi took one wing of the house, and Daniel's family took another. And life, for the first time in a long time, felt full. His sister regained her strength. Her smile returned. Her laughter filled the halls. After her final round of treatments, she was declared fully recovered. Daniel kept his promise to himself. He graduated with top honors. No shortcuts, no easy money, just hard work and quiet growth. Kofi, too, returned to his teaching, this time at a better school. But both men felt the same thing tugging at them, a desire to do more, to make meaning out of the pain they had survived. So together, they built something new. The Benson Adenuga Foundation, named after Evelyn's late husband and Daniel's father. A place where young creatives, dreamers, and entrepreneurs could find support, mentorship, and opportunity. No scams, no secrets. Just open doors for those who needed a chance. They held the launch event in the same courtyard where Evelyn once stood so alone. Now it was filled with students, laughter, and dreams. Daniel stood beside Kofi that evening, both of them looking out over the crowd. The night was soft, the stars bright. From ashes, Kofi said quietly. Daniel smiled. Something beautiful.